to approve the minutes of the meeting held 6th of February. Were there any questions on the minutes? No? Okay, well, I'm happy that they are, I'm happy to propose that they are approved. That's seconded by Richard. And I presume all in favour? Yes, thank you. We have no public questions or statements that have been made aware of. Declarations of interest, just for myself in relation to item 16. I think as I've declared to you already, I won't be voting on that item, having heard from many of the interested prospective tenants, in correspondence, etc., ahead of this item. So I feel compromised such that I won't be voting on that item. Was there anything else from anyone else? No? Okay. Items of urgent business. I don't believe there are any. Item 6, member questions. Were there any at this stage? No. Okay. And item 7, recommendations from cabinet working parties and the Built Heritage Working Party. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say here, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, suffice to say that as regards the Norfolk Coast A and B update management plan, it's a statutory duty under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, Section 89, if you remember, that we need to review this every 5 years. So what it will do is bring in the supplementary planning documents and the like, countrywide plans, the latest North Norfolk landscape character assessment, things like that. It's also an opportunity to, as it were, audit the quality of the coast as well. So I heartily recommend it. Good piece of work. That's all I've got to say on that. The next item, National Planning Policy Framework. We have some concerns about it. Those are reflected in the debates at the Working Party. We will be feeding our response into the government. Of course, we're a small voice among many, so exactly what effect that will have remains to be seen. But it's obviously an opportunity to consider what the latest government thinking is on planning policy, which is rapidly and ever evolving, as we know. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Were there any questions on that? Thank you for that, Andrew. No? Okay. Item 8, recommendations from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Nigel, do you want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were no recommendations from our 15th of February meeting, so that's short and sweet.
Brilliant, thank you. Item 9, budget monitoring for period 10. So obviously where there's 4-year expected overspend, largely due to inflation, offset, of course, by the recruitment freeze and other measures which have saved quite a significant amount of money. And of course, we are expecting some more income from other sources. So I'm saying it's obviously in the absence of Eric. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to highlight, or if there's anything you wanted to say at this point.
Morning, everybody. The only thing that I think I would add is that we have asked officers to only spend on essential items up to the end of the year to try and reduce that deficit down still a bit further when compared to the budget. So hopefully by the year end it will be a bit lower still.
Mm-hmm. I think compared to what some other authorities overspends have been, I don't think this is anything, anything that should be a surprise, really, given that the scale of inflation that has occurred. But that said, there's obviously more work that we need to try and do to reduce that as much as possible. Questions? No? Okay. Item 9, sorry, we need to agree the recommendations. So note the contents of the report and recommend to full council that any outturn deficit is funded by the general reserve. So I'll propose, and seconded by Lucy. All those in favour, please. Yeah, unanimous, thank you. Item 10 is managing performance for Q3. So I think I have to highlight, there's been particularly exciting developments in the climate, coast and environment area, with the completion of the tree planting, and obviously due very shortly, the event coming up to mark the end of that work. The solar carport is of course on the agenda today. That's very exciting, but there's all sorts of other work being done across the organisation as we reach the end of the council, and it's very good to see so many things reaching such a point in time that it's things are being delivered. And obviously there's always challenges. One thing I did want to highlight was on the benefit change of circumstances. I'm aware we're delivering 8 days at the moment on change of circumstances, which is really considerably better than it has been. That's really welcome. And obviously it's been a challenge for the authorities. One area where we've been applying, been considering quite a bit, because we obviously want that delivery of that service to be as good as possible, but it's now in line with other authorities, so it's going to get there. But there have obviously been some significant changes in the quality of life area with the blue flags, which will obviously be reflected in future reports. Sadly so, obviously, with the loss of those blue flags. Were there any questions on this item? No? Okay. So, well, I propose that we note the report then. Is that seconded? Yeah. Everyone presumably happy with that. Item 11, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund, item 11. Richard, did you want to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to. I'd like to voice my thanks to Stuart Quick, who spent a long time looking through the parameters that were set out in these 2 funds and has carefully selected the ones that are appropriate to this area, and establishing a board with the MPs and business leaders to start looking at where we feed the benefit of this fund. The funding comes in from April. We are going to be working with other councils with the LEP to help distribute this fund. But it's been very, the cooperation across the board has been very encouraging. And this is something in the first year we'll be looking specifically at communities to help with the cost of living and those sort of issues, and then moving on to skills in the later years. That's as an introduction. I don't know if anyone asks questions, but Stuart's here, but the team have done a really good job on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart, and any others that have been involved, very much appreciated. I suppose one sort of area of concern for me is we don't get the administrative or financial help for administration, I should say, on the rural element of this. I don't know to what extent it's viewed that we might have any sort of pressures as a result of that.
Well, one of the reasons that we are almost combining the 2 funds, and this is sort of money that would have come from Europe before. There is no administrative help in one of the funds, which is why we've taken this route of going down with the LEP to help with the administration rather than appoint a specific person, because we haven't got the capacity within the team to do the administration.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So obviously not just a pillar of the levelling up agenda, but also post EU funding. It has taken a long while to emerge, and some are obviously very frustrated at that, rightly so. But I'm sure we'll make a very good go of this and really welcome all the work that's been done so far and look forward to seeing the further development in this area. Were there any questions? Okay, so I'm happy to propose the 2 recommendations. Sorry, go ahead, Christopher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wonder when we members will see proposals for what the money will actually be spent on, where the office is in terms of pulling that plan together.
I mean, the funding, we have already started talking to businesses when the funding arrives, and we've got the actual contract set up, the service agreement set up with the we'll be looking, it should be shortly post April, start of April, when the funding comes through.
And that will be on an ongoing basis that different projects.
Absolutely.
Won't it? So it won't all be in one go.
It can't be,
No.
because the time takes, the applications have to be sorted and approved.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, go
So
ahead.
can I just, so are we saying then the funding will actually come through on an incremental basis as
does.
opposed to the one lump?
Yeah, it does. It comes in different, it comes in incremental.
Tranches.
And three tranches over.
Yeah, I
over 3 years.
understood the first one, yeah, and the role I wasn't quite sure. So it's on a 3-year basis, isn't it? I think, yeah.
And we can roll over year 1 to 2, which is helping smooth.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm happy to propose the 2 recommendations detailed on the bottom of that item. Seconded. Everyone in favour? Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. Item 12 is the Employer Defence Recognition Scheme. And yeah, this is very welcome. Virginia, did you want to introduce him?
Thank you, Chairman. This is about the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme. This is a path which we started out on in 2022. We achieved a bronze award for this scheme. Achieving a silver award would be the next step in this path. We have a recommendation here before us to give authority to the lead officer and the Armed Forces member champion to liaise with human resources and other internal services to identify and implement any changes which we might need to our policy in order to achieve a silver award. And I simply recommend that we do this and go ahead with it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. John, you've indicated.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Virginia. Yeah, as the Armed Forces member for the council, I'd like to thank officers for the work that they've put into this. It's welcome. They continue to support our Armed Forces community. We need to remember that all Armed Forces personnel, even though they're paid, they are volunteers. They give willingly for us, whether that's at home or abroad. Mm-hmm. And therefore to return that commitment to them by setting an example through this Defence Employer Recognition Scheme would be, you know, I believe we'll see a really good move, that we acknowledge that and actually set an example to other businesses to consider doing this. Yeah. And also, could I just ask that other departments work with the officers, the lead officers, to deliver this on time so that we can get it in, because there is a particular closing date. So thank you, and thank you again.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Well, this isn't just a nice thing to do. I think it's absolutely essential that we do it. So I really welcome this work. And yeah, proposed and seconded by Virginia and Wendy. Were there any other questions just before I move to the vote? All of those in favour of accepting the recommendation, please. Yeah, unanimous. Thanks again. Item 13, the local, just check I hadn't moved on, jumped an item, the local authority housing grant opportunity, item 13. Wendy, go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. I just want to start by saying thank you to Nikki and Graham for working so hard to make this grant bid work, using their creativity and imagination to try and make something of this. Here you have a paper outlining the government's wish to show a half-hearted attempt at compassion again, not even to give the same support to our homeless families, not even to give the full amount of money to buy 11 homes, just to fund 40% of the asking price for the 11 homes in North Norfolk and giving us 1.4 million to do that. We will take the money and do what we can in partnership with housing associations. We cannot afford the remaining 60% of the deal ourselves. For the people of North Norfolk, it is vitally important to remember it is not the fault of those who have fled war that this scheme and restrictions have been offered. It is from the government. So please do not feed the anti-refugee narrative. We do not want to drive people away from their places of safety so that the government is no longer responsible for them. The only hope that is that after these homes are not needed, they will remain with our registered providers and used for temporary accommodation without the strict criteria of who can use them. So I'm going to commend this to you and ask, obviously we have to take the money, but we will do it in mind of all people of North Norfolk and our guests. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Yes, obviously, this is welcome, but it does have some limitations, and those are clearly apparent. I welcome that we have a housing provider, registered housing provider, that are willing to work with us, and that will, of course, help deliver some much needed homes in this instance, but it isn't sufficient to deliver the whole project, the finance that we're getting, of course. Were there any questions on this item? Was there anyone that wanted to say anything more? Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Good morning. Just a little bit of clarification. I noticed that we're hoping to go into the partnership with Flagship Housing.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are other providers, and I just wondered why. I've got one line that says Broadland may be too busy or too much, but there are other providers, and I just wonder how much of a load this is going to put onto Flagship, where there are other supporters that may be able to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I'm happy to pass over to Nikki, but we had approached our other registered providers and asked them if they'd like to take part in this. Flagship were the ones that are willing to work with us. They are also working with a number of other local authorities on this. So we're not the only people, council, to be offered this deal. So they are looking at it very carefully and seeing what funds they have available to put forward. Thank you, John. I don't know if Nikki wants to add anything.
I think I'm right in saying most of the other Norfolk authorities, bar Broadland, were offered an allocation of the funding. So,
Yeah, I don't think Broadland Council were offered. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you happy to propose the recommendations? I'd be happy to second them. And can I take a vote of all of those in favour, please? So unanimous again. Thank you. Item 14 is establishing a joint venture with Anglian Water and other Norfolk authorities to provide environmental credits. And certainly welcome all the work that's been done on this. It's been well, what a journey it's been this year over this matter. Andrew, I don't know if there's something you want to say to introduce us to this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to echo what you're saying. We've obviously worked on this, and it's credit to our officers, to the Director for Climate Change and the Assistant Director for Planning, to work with other stakeholders, partners in this venture, proposed venture, to bring this to the stage we've reached in relatively record time. When we look at the processes in other areas of the country which have been affected historically, we can see it's taken, from the report, we can see it's taken 2 to 3 years for them to reach this sort of this stage in the process. So well done to everyone involved. And I think of the 3 options, a developer-led scheme doesn't quite sit comfortably, I think, with our ethos as a district council here in North Norfolk. Natural England Mitigation, we've seen that their methods of trying to produce a calculator don't exactly agree with our own. So I would be looking at that with some degree of skepticism. So I think of the three, as it were, options on the table, the joint venture is clearly the best one. The seed funding of £30,000 seems extremely reasonable. Annual running costs of 300,000, I think I've seen in the papers, also seems reasonable. What I would like an assurance or comfort on is if that figure increases, that we have funding in our reserves to up the ante if needs be. Couple of concerns. I'm not quite sure what would happen on a split vote. I see that Anglian Water will have 5 shares and the 5 authorities involved will each have 1 share, and there's no casting vote for the chairman. Not quite sure how the chairman's going to be appointed, but I'm sure that will be worked out to the satisfaction of everybody. So perhaps a little bit more detail on that before we take a vote. And also just comparing numbers, we see in clause 1.10 that there's just over 1,500 planning permissions being delayed here in North Norfolk. And if you jump to the next page at 2.4, we see that there's between 1,750 and 2,200 across Norfolk. So that suggests to me, unless I'm misreading it, I'm happy to be corrected, that the greatest need is here in North Norfolk in terms of numbers, in terms of the hold up in release of sites and buildings. So there's obviously going to be some, as it were, contention between how these schemes are allocated. I would have liked to have seen some government involvement in the control of the market in acquiring land. Obviously, that's going to be very interesting to see moving forward, and how that will affect the availability of sites, whether there's going to be a call for sites, what the mechanism is for that. But other than those points, surprisingly, I'm quite happy with it and quite happy to propose it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I suppose one thing that bugged me was that I see Natural England have identified just one of the sites in Norfolk where mitigation could take place, but haven't offered details of it. And I suppose that seems to me a bit of an irritation, really, given we've been working as hard as we can on this. I want to see everyone else doing the same that's involved, and Natural England obviously imposed this to start with. So that is a concern. Obviously, there's going to be a mosaic of different responses here. The private developers can offer their own mitigation, etc. But we obviously need this to work. Was Philip, I don't know if you wanted to come in and say anything.
I'm happy to answer questions, really, Chairman. It's a long agenda this morning.
Sure.
This is an extraordinarily complicated area of planning policy and practice. The position in terms of answer to questions raised by our portfolio holder, the chairmanship of the board would rotate between Anglian Water and the member authorities, so that would be a rotating chairmanship. At the moment, that is obviously being set down in terms of reference. In terms of numbers of applications delayed, we have approximately 99 applications. Well, last time I looked, and that's rising in terms of the applications delayed. It's important to say that the Norfolk Environmental Credit Paper that you have in front of you is the best option for delivery of solutions for small and medium-sized enterprises. I think the paper says that. So from our point of view, we're going to focus the delivery in terms of allocations for those small to medium-sized enterprises. And North Norfolk has more small to medium enterprise builders in our district than most of our partners on the board. So it is really important that we take those issues forward and we enable those developers that have been held for in excess of a year to move forward. The £30,000 is seed funding that is not likely to be returned. It is effectively our share to enable us to take this matter forward. In terms of the three strands of environmental credits, the first strand clearly is that of the developer purchasing land and delivering their own form of mitigation. That's likely to happen on the larger sites and probably is going to be more economically viable for the larger developers because of their scale of economies. Natural England are led in terms of nature-based solutions. So they're looking at reed beds, silt traps, etc. Their solutions are taking longer to come forward. I understand that the site that was identified in North Norfolk is now not likely to come forward. So that puts a greater emphasis on that wide range of mitigation that is on offer from Norfolk Environmental Credits, and puts a greater emphasis, I believe, Chairman, today on taking this paper forward with a positive view for North Norfolk. I don't have other options available other than those three that are highlighted in the report. So there's a firm, strong recommendation that this is good value for money and will help to unlock the delivery of new homes and tourism initiatives in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, it certainly does put more emphasis on this, and welcome again all the work that you've done on that. I've got Wendy and then Richard.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I just want to look at 1.6 paragraph. And it says Anglian Water is also affected by nutrient neutrality, and the government has indicated that performance of wastewater treatment plants also must improve by 2030, although legislation is still awaited. I just want to highlight that we've lost our blue flag in Munsley. As a result, we don't know for definite, of a water treatment plant. I would like Anglian Water to come in and talk to us about their commitment of this paragraph about increasing the performance of wastewater treatment plants, because otherwise it seems that they're marking their own homework. So I'd like to suggest that they come in and actually explain what their plan is to do that with us, and what that role will be in the joint venture company.
Yeah, okay. I accept that, because I mean we have obviously had some meetings with Anglian Water and the Environment Agency in respect of, sorry, I'll come a bit closer to the microphone, in respect of the blue flag issue. It's obviously separate here, but there is that connection. So in future, I'd certainly welcome further discussions with that body. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I propose that amendment?
Philip, you want to advise?
I mean, I can maybe help members with some clarity. The measures being talked about are measures to be included in the Levelling Up Bill. So there will become formal legal requirements for all water bodies to improve by 2030. So they will be bound by those improvements. The individual local plans for those particular water authorities obviously will be subject to individual development and action through an action plan. I will be speaking to Anglian Water at my next meeting with the board. I'll be very happy to raise that point. But at this moment in time, Chairman, I think it's right to reflect that this is a national issue that will be imposed upon the water companies, and that by 2030 there will be clear benchmarks that they will have to hit. So as we walk that road towards 2030, they will have to be investing, they will have to be making improvements. I'm not here to be an apologist for the water authorities, but at this moment in time, I'm not sure that I can tell you what that action plan will be, because it is 7 years away. But I can say that the Levelling Up Bill will make that requirement and will actually require those formal reductions in phosphorus and nitrate releases into the water environment. And that's warmly welcomed by everyone who's on board.
Okay, thank you. I've got a few indications. So Virginia, you look quite keen to come in there.
I was just going to say that clean water was once a very considerable accomplishment of this country, and it's a shame to see things slipping backwards. And I was going to say, if Councillor Fredericks is suggesting that we invite Anglian Water to come and talk to us about what is happening in our area, I would be very content to support that proposal.
Okay. Well, should we do that separately? Is that okay? That we can obviously have that discussion. I think it would be a valuable conversation. We know about the issues at the Gimmingham CSO, etc. Is it okay to come to, do you want to come in right now?
If I may just come in, Chair, just on the back of what Philip's been saying on page 118 in the issues and risks section 6.1 subparagraph C, there is a reference to Anglian Water and the process by which they will be called to account through the levelling up and regeneration bill. So that's a risk that has effectively been taken into account in the proposal for the joint venture. It is recognised. It's unfortunate that parliamentary time means it's not in lockstep with we're ahead of Parliament, as it were, on this issue, and it's not in lockstep, and the two are not going to coincide. But we can't afford to delay this. We need to progress as soon as possible, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Richard, and then I've got Nigel and then Nigel.
Thank you, Tim. I will support this, but I think the elephant in the room for me here is the attitude of Anglian Water. Is they're an uncomfortable bedfellow. I think with the blue flags, they are looking at us, them stating that it's more of a European directive and that they would suggest that we actually adopt our own lower standards, and that really worries me. There is no mention, and it's away from nutrient neutrality, agriculture has not been considered, and that's still one of the biggest polluters to my mind. And after recent meetings with businesses, it's apparent that we haven't got enough water to support our agriculture business, never mind another 50,000 houses going in. So whilst I support this for the immediate easing of nutrient neutrality and planning, there are far bigger issues we have to raise, and I don't know how we're getting it. The reservoirs that are being planned aren't due to come until 2030s, and how we get water to 50,000 houses in the meantime is going to be a massive issue, and how we deal and help agriculture reduce their pollution is again a bigger issue for me. I just want that put on record. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Nigel, behind you first, and then I'll come to you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Nigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. Yes, I am supportive in principle of this paper. For me, it's a starter for 10. It's a framework on which I think an awful lot of a skeleton, if you like, on which a lot more flesh has to be added. I struggle. The bit that I kind of struggle with is what will this look like when this is developed, and how will it work in practice? Some of that is in here, but an awful lot of it isn't. And in my view, the devil is in the detail. And I think, as Mr. Rowson said already, this is a very complex area. And so there are a number of concerns that I have throughout this. And to some extent, I'm not quite sure where to start, but I think the paucity of detail for me is probably the greatest challenge. I mean, at paragraph 3.5, it says it is not anticipated that the joint venture will be a direct provider of mitigation solutions itself. Well, the provision of mitigation solutions is really at the very heart of this, and we don't know who's going to do it. What we've seen to be shaping up at the moment is kind of getting local planning authorities in the same room, if you like, as Anglian Water. And so we're heading in the right direction, and hopefully we'll have a common agenda in order to do that. But I don't know what this will look like. I don't know how this is going to work. And we talk about how it's going to work. I look at 3.10, for example, where in the first one of those, on the first come, first serve basis, allocating credits in oldest and newest order. That's absolutely fine. What it doesn't say though is that going to be across all the LPA areas? Or are we going to have some LPAs who are going to say, well, we're in South Norfolk, we've got far greater pressure than you have in North Norfolk, and therefore we're going to have the first pick of those. I think that there's a lot of detail that needs to be worked up. So these kind of expressions of principles are fine, but I think actually how they get interpreted and how they get actually applied will be the test of whether this works or whether it doesn't. And that's some way down the road at the moment. The other thread that kind of is through all of this at the moment is, I guess it's a thread of optimism. It's the thread of optimism in terms of timescale. And I think it will be quite difficult to hold to these timescales. And I know that out there are developers that are quite wedded to these. Their expectations are quite high, and that's not unreasonable either. And the other thread that runs through this is costs. I'm not at all sure that the costs that we've been talking about so far are very firm. I notice in some of the wording, for example, our 30,000 that we'll put in for the first year. I think it says in one of the paragraphs, it is anticipated that that will be sufficient and that there won't be further funding running onwards. So I think there are a number of gaps in this. I don't mean in that in a critical way. I just need to draw that, I think, to our attention that this is a starter for 10 for me, and there's an awful lot more work to be done to make this look like a deliverable, robust solution or a framework on which solutions will flow and will be administered in a fair and equitable way. So there are a number, as I said, of questions that I would raise. I guess they're not going to be answered today, but you know, when it comes to risks and issues, they go up to they go from A to F, and I put an extra one in, which is basically mitigation solutions being progressed in local planning authority areas, but not in others. In other words, this is what I was saying earlier about whether we have equal treatment across them. And therefore the release of planning applications not being evenly spread across the affected areas, or nutrient neutrality not happening in some river catchment areas, and thus some rivers failing the nutrient neutrality requirements. We've heard already about one site being identified. Well, I've no idea quite where that site is. So that might provide, I don't know, let's say it provides a solution within South Norfolk or Broadland. Where do we fit in that queue? Where does our site, I think there's a lot more that needs to be done here. And I'm not expecting those details today. I'm just really pointing out that there really is a lot more that we need to see or that I need to see in order to be convinced that this is something that is going to deliver what we need in the kind of timescale that we are expecting. Yeah. Just picking up on Councillor Kershaw's point, I think that whilst I share his concerns about water supply and the whole water cycle issue, that of course is a separate subject. This isn't really dealing with that in essence. That's another one that we have got to pick up on in due course. It's already up and running, I know, but just to deal with nutrient neutrality, I think this paper will be complex enough on its own. Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, I think you've got a flavour of where I'm at. I'm supportive in principle, and would therefore like to see it go forward. But along with that are a raft of caveats and requirements that a lot more flesh be added to the framework. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I suppose, of course, we need to see a demonstrable reduction in nutrient pollution affecting our rivers and broads, etc. as well. So absolutely. Nigel, go ahead.
Yeah, Councillor Dixon's actually summed up a lot of what I was going to say myself. Actually, there are a huge amount of unknowns in here, and what concerns me is some of these unknowns, which probably can't be answered today, as has been said. But you know, if ultimately developers are going to be asked to contribute sums of money to offset their nutrient neutrality. I'd like to understand how that will affect their viability, and particularly in terms of affordable housing and other benefits that we've become familiar with developments. And just to pick up on Councillor Kirsch's comment about agriculture, I mean, every day of the week, nitrates and phosphates are going in across land right across this county, and this doesn't go anywhere near protecting environments from that damage. And so this is just a very thin end of the wedge to me. However, there is nothing else on the table now, and we do need to build homes. There is a crisis. So yeah, lots of concerns with this. And perhaps one question that someone might be able to answer is, when this is reviewed a year down the road, you know, will it come back to this council to see what progress has been made and what decisions have been made? I'd hate to see this. I spoke today and then find that we've entered a juggernaut that's trundling down the road and that we can't stop. I don't know whether that's.
Yeah, but can you clarify? Is there going to be a reporting back process? Is that something we?
Thank you, Chairman.
Clarify?
It's clear in the report that what we're looking at is seed funding to set up a private company, an arm's length company here. So the arm's length company would be set up and would be formed itself. I will be happy to report back to Cabinet on progress on nutrient neutrality, and we can agree to do that. We can ask for board members to consider attending Cabinet to update members in 1 year's time. What I need to be clear today with members is that this will be a company in its own right. This is not a set of councils that are establishing an agreement to work together. This is actually a separate independent company that will be formed to set up credits, and those credits will be used to generate money to invest with landowners, septic tank renovations, etc., that will deliver the benefits that are going to come forward through the environmental credit system. So it isn't actually anything more than a joint venture to set up an independent company. I need that to be as clear as possible today, Chairman. But as a party to that, if we agree this recommendation, then of course officers can report back on the progress with the joint venture and Norfolk environmental credits on a regular basis as required.
Okay, thank you. Lucy, go ahead.
Thank you. Morning, members. On page 119 at the top, first critical issue, the need to identify a portfolio of short-term mitigation to enable planning applications to be considered and determined and new homes delivered. I've just got a couple of questions on that. How long do we believe that will take? Because it feels like we're looking for quick wins there so that we can get something moving. Is that something that we're going to have to look at independently as districts? And short-term mitigation doesn't feel like a long-term solution. So by short-term mitigation, how short is short-term and what are we going to replace it with?
Go ahead, thank you.
Chairman, again, I'm pleased to answer that question. So the group of short-term mitigation measures is actually available. We have actually defined what those mitigation measures will be. In the simplest terms, they could be purchasing an agreement with landowners to plant a cover crop. We've talked about agriculture and nitrate and phosphate runoff issues. So it could be a change in farming practice that could be in place for a period of years until the natural reed bed silt trap mitigation measures are available, or until there are investments by Anglian Water in terms of wastewater treatment plants that are available that will take those issues. So the short-term measures are geared towards the provision of filling that gap, where currently it will take at least 18 months to 2 years for a nature-based solution to come online, to grow through and become effective in terms of removing nutrients from the water system. So the aim is that you have a blend of short-term and longer-term mitigation measures which are coming on board, and that hopefully is something that is clearer for members in terms of the need for the short-term mitigation. As I say, we've got developers who are held for over a year now, who are invested as small to medium-sized enterprises trying to take development investment forward, and some of those companies are now running up against very difficult times. Our aim is for the first available credits to come forward in April and May of this year.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, if short term's 18 months to 2 years and we're banking on other things being in place after the 2 years, what if they're not? If these are short term, how long will we have to continue the short term for? And how long can we sustainably do that?
Yes, sorry.
Through you, Chairman. The aim will be that we're already developing agreements with Anglian Water for improvements to wastewater treatment plants that will be coming online. We're looking at the provision of agreements with local landowners for nature-based solutions. The use of short-term measures is a stopgap measure to enable these developments to come forward, and the position of Natural England, who will be have some oversight in these matters, is that they will only release development when they are satisfied that we have long-term permanent mitigation in place for new development that is coming forward. In effect, short-term is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a measure that will become available in its first instance this springtime, and it will be a measure which will be geared towards alleviating the longer term delivery of those matters, which will take 18 months to 2 years to come forward.
Okay, thank you. Steve? Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I mean, I think I absolutely agree with what Mr. Rowson's just said. You know, this is almost a year now since the Natural England statement was received around nutrient neutrality and the impact that had on development across large parts of Norfolk. This paper is a partnership solution of 5 local authorities that have come together to try and address this issue and provide greater certainty for the construction sector, house building sector, both large and small businesses. But it is very much a stopgap. It is very much a practical response and a work in progress, which will have to be developed over time. I think the issues that have been raised this morning need to be seen in context as to the wider relationship that the authority as local planning authority has with Anglian Water around their investment programme and their relationship with Ofwat in terms of their approved capital programme. I think that in terms of accommodating future growth, both in terms of water scarcity, the quality of water discharge, the impact on wastewater treatment works, and the aspiration to get a better balance in terms of nature-based solutions and the quality of our seawater, it does suggest that there needs to be a much more strategic conversation with Anglian Water moving forward if we're to address all of those issues in a reasonable timeframe. Otherwise, I think the concerns of members around the outcome of this piece of work relative to those other issues has to be set in some context. I don't think these things can be considered in isolation, but I do think this is a practical response by the local planning authorities in Norfolk to otherwise considerable uncertainty, which would have implications for both economic and housing growth in Norfolk for some years to come. So I think the proposal has to be seen in that context. I commend the work that's been done across the 5 authorities to try and find a practical solution. Mr. Rowson's been involved in months of discussions with partners around this. Legal advice has been obtained, and that has been shared with members previously around what I accept is not a finished model. It is, as you say, a work in progress. But I don't think we can put off the day of doing nothing further, because I just think it creates even more uncertainty. So the paper before you is well considered, but it is not the finished article. And I think we need to work through with the specialist officers that have led on this work to see how it works, what those shortcomings are, and to ensure that North Norfolk
gets the best out of that in terms of the concerns which councillor Dixon raised about equity across the 5 authorities, because clearly we want to see a solution here that works for North Norfolk as well as those other authority areas.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Yeah, that's completely understood. So I've got a few indications. We try and wrap this up soon, but John, and then Nigel. So John rest first, John Toy.
Thank you. I won't be long. I just wondered why this doesn't include our other Norfolk cousins of Kings Lynn and Great Yarmouth. Are they not part of this venture?
Yeah, Philip, go ahead.
Happy to answer that, Chairman. The nutrient neutrality restrictions are applied to the Wensum and to the Broads. The impacts on Yarmouth and Kings Lynn, West Norfolk are so significantly limited that they do not believe that they need to be part of this group working. So they consider that their impact from nutrient neutrality restrictions is such that they don't need to engage in this credit delivery model.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just again, something that can't be answered today, but we're setting up a separate company which we can have a report back from us, but we need to know what it's still costing us, because we've had Officer Rosen has spent much time on this, and there must be a cost to the authority, and it would be interesting to see if we can find a way to monitor that. I think we need to understand what it's costing us, despite what we're sending out into this separate company. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I've got Nigel, and then go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add, I think to what the Chief Executive has said, I think one of the challenges for us is going to be managing expectations, because I think expectations at the moment are quite high out there. We have to be careful, I think, in when we would talk about this. This is not a solution in itself. This is an approach towards a solution, and those solutions are some way down the road yet. And from my conversations with others, I think that the expectations are a bit too high at the moment. I think they are probably higher in some LPA areas than others. So I do think we need to be cautious in how we promote this. At the moment, it is, as I said, a framework, and it's an approach, and it's the right way to go, but there's a long way to go.
Okay, thank you. Harry, go ahead.
Just to say, I pick up on the Yarmouth and Kings Lynn, and it doesn't appear to be a level playing field. I think the most pertinent district that has escaped nutrient neutrality is Suffolk Coastal and Waveney, who actually feed into the catchment area of the Waveney River, which feeds into the Broads. And I find that peculiar that Suffolk Coastal has escaped this restriction opposed to Norfolk, because they still feed into the Broad system. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. That's interesting. Okay, so as we recognise it's going to be an awful lot to do, and we sort of want to see how this all will work, but this is a framework from which we can hopefully start to see houses delivered again in the areas of Norfolk affected by nutrient neutrality, and do welcome all the work that offices from both this and other authorities and other sources have committed to trying to address a very big impasse. So I'm happy to propose the recommendations on setting up a joint venture. Can I ask that that's seconded, please? Did we sort of say that we would deal with that at a separate setting? Is that okay? Just so we don't sort of confuse the issue too much, but muddy the waters. Yes, exactly. That's very much the thing to say, isn't it?
I'm happy
we
to
will do
second,
that.
Chair.
Seconded by Andrew. Thank you. And all of those in favour, please. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay. And thank you, Philip, for answering a number of questions there. Item 15 is the Reef solar carport. Very excited to see this come to the cabinet. Nigel, did you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, happy to introduce. I'm delighted to see this cabinet paper before us today too. This project will help to secure the financial sustainability of the Reef Leisure Centre in an era where many other local authorities are struggling to maintain these high energy demand facilities due to soaring energy costs. Indeed, over 60 pools have closed over the last few years in England, with many councils still actively considering whether they can continue to maintain them going forward. This project stacks up financially, offering excellent returns on investment. It will reduce NNDC overheads immediately it becomes operational and continue to do so into the long term. It will help secure the sustainability of the Reef Leisure Centre and will provide a secured new income stream for the council. I'm hopeful that this project will act as an exemplar for future projects that utilise the council estate to generate a sustainable income and save money on the overheads. And I commend it to Cabinet for
Thank you,
approval.
Nigel. I certainly associate myself with everything you've just said there. Thank you. Virginia.
Thank you, Jim. I just wanted to second this today. I think it demonstrates our commitment not only to the environment, but also to our leisure facilities, a provision for our visitors and for our residents, and also to financial prudence. I think it's altogether a good thing that addresses many of our ambitions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, any further questions on this item? Well, once again, we welcome all of the work that's been done to get us to this stage, and welcome everything that's will be done to deliver the solar carport. So excited to see this come to fruition. I can take a vote of all of those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 16, the lease of premises at North Lodge Park in Cromer. This is the disused Seaview Nursery, the ladies and gents toilets, and the cafe, or the disused cafe, I should say. Renata, are you okay to say something to introduce this briefly? Thank you.
Thank you. So the premises known as Seaview do comprise a former nursery, cafe and public toilets. The building became vacant when both tenants vacated, and the public toilets will become redundant with a new proposal at the tennis courts. Following a marketing exercise, we received 10 bids. These were for the lease of the premises and from a range of different businesses and organisations. We have assessed and reviewed those, and details of those can be found in the exempt appendix. We've made some recommendations to members, and would like to seek an approval to be able to lease the premises. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, sir. So I think it's quite exciting to see this many proposals come forward for a single building, isn't it? Well, we had 10 originally, obviously one pulled out, they got a premises elsewhere. But it's great to see this level of interest in a building and an opportunity, recognizing of course the potential of the park and the asset. So well done for dealing with all of that. It's good to see so much variety and potential with all of those bids, and I welcome every single one of them. Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. And yes, it is refreshing to see so many bids come forward for this. I've taken a long time to read through the papers, and I know we have a responsibility as a council to look at the best value bid. But there is one caveat I'd like to mention. It's not just money. It's about the value to the community, and having taken into account across the board, initially I was weighted towards a nursery, but one of the things with North Lodge Park, we need to bring life back into the park, and nurseries these days, kids are dropped off and then they're virtually locked in and then they're taken away again. And I question the demand locally for a nursery. However, I mean, I'm minded to support option 3, which is not the biggest return, but I think in terms of the charity that works there, and we know them, they work here in this building. It's a project that would keep a facility open to the public, open not just in the tourist season, late into the evening as well. And it's a community benefit that I see would sit well in our portfolio and would help support the regeneration of Cromer and North Lodge Park. So I personally would propose that we accept option 3.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Yes, so there's an awful lot, of course, going on in North Lodge Park at the moment. We've leased another structure sort of north and west of this building. That's locally known as Collector's Cabinets. It's thatched structure. Utilities are being put in at the moment for an ice cream parlour and outlet. And then, of course, you're aware of the work going on to the east at the tennis courts with planning application there. Installation of new toilets, multi-use area, really, food hub potentially. So it's exciting to see this much going on potentially in an area that has been quite problematic at some points for this council. So yeah, very much welcome all of these proposals, but Richard's obviously made a proposal there in terms of item 3. I've got Lucy and then Virginia.
Thank you. I actually support Councillor Kershaw's recommendation, actually. Purely for the social value, which is immeasurable. I don't have anything else to add on that because it's all in purple papers, but I would second Councillor Kershaw's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's seconded. Virginia, go ahead.
I think also in the present climate, this might prove to be a more viable, safe operation because it is a community project.
Thank you. Wendy, go ahead.
Can we just get some clarification that nursery provision isn't needed in Cromer and it's actually well supported at the moment?
So there will be future needs for nursery and playgroup provision. And indeed, you know, there were some considerations in the local plan for the Cromer locality, albeit they were taken out to one of the sites that was proposed allocation for such the county council then deciding really to put its eggs in one basket, Suffield Park Infants. And I neglected to mention I'm a governor at that location as well. So if we can just note that interest. Suffield Park Infant School. They've obviously enlarged, they benefited from Section 106 funding a number of years ago. So there's a lot of facilities there for that, and it's doing very well. So there might be future needs, and there is additional need for children's play without a doubt. But there's a call to make here whether this is the right location for that, and also with the nursery provision, there have been some cases in recent history where the county council have obviously been pulled back from those provisions. This was one of those cases, really, because there were 2 proposals for nursery provision at Seaview before this. They didn't come to fruition. We're aware of what's happened at Wells. That said, this is a private proposal. So whilst there would be obviously a lot of work with the county council, it's disconnected from that. So I don't sort of question the strength of the proposal. I think very credible people, they've got a lot of experience. But I suppose you've got to ask yourself those other questions.
Coming back on that point, I guess there's no parking or arrangements for people to drop off their children there, is there?
I think there might be one space dedicated to it, but it's from memory. And if the arrangements are the same as they were previously.
Yeah.
But it's not it's desirable, of course, to reduce the number of cars coming through the park. That's one of the ambitions. Okay, so did I have another indication that I've forgotten about? No.
Can I check? I think there's been a proposed and second amendment to the recommendation. So that will need to be voted on first.
Yeah.
And given what members have said, I think that the alternative proposal is to approve proposal reference 3 as outlined in the exempt Appendix A, which demonstrates the promotion or improvement of social wellbeing to such an extent that it departs from the starting section 1, 2, 3 principle.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Cara. If that's accepted, so I'm certainly just, again, welcome the other 8 proposals. I mean, one had to be approved here, and I think it's good to see so much strength in all of those, and hope they all find other ventures, and it's just very good to see that level of interest. So that's proposed and seconded option 3. Yeah, the amendment first. Yeah. So is there one substantive vote, or do I need to have 2?
Well, firstly, see if the amended proposal goes through, and if not, then we vote on the original.
Okay, that's fine then. So on the amended proposal as proposed by Richard Kershaw, seconded by Lucy Shires, can I have a vote of all of those in favour, please? So that's unanimous, with the exception of myself abstaining. Okay, so that's carried. Okay, well done. Thank you for that. That's really good progress for that area of Cromer. Item 17, exclusion of press and public. I don't think there's any further reason to do that, so I was just reading the agenda closely there. There's no private business. So thank you everyone for your time this morning, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.